So this is part 3 of my reading my old Twilight fanfiction saga. I basically recorded it last year and then lost the footage, but now I have found it and I have finally finished editing it. This is the final part. This is an unfinished fanfiction, unfortunately. Like, it is gold, so like I really wish that it was complete, but it does not have an ending. So this is really up to you to just think back on what's happened and use your own mind to just come up with a perfect ending, and just share it with me, because I would love to see how you just think it would end, because I'm pretty sure my ending was just basically a rip-off from the actual Twilight books. But here is part 3, so I hope you enjoy it.
Well then, who are you? The brunette boy asked. I'm Jackson, a friend of the Collards, I answered. Oh, anyone in particular, Jackson? The short blonde that couldn't be more than 15 asked. What are your names? Was all I replied. They smiled and looked at each other. I'm Alec, and this is my sister Jane. We're taking you to Arrow. Arrow? Arrow? What was his name? It's Arrow now. We are the Volturi, he replied. Why? I asked before a sharp electric pain made me fall to the floor in Porsche. What? I'm really confused because, like, the name Renesmee Cullen and then the word Porsche are written down here, but they're scored out and they don't fit into the actual writing. So I'm wondering if, like, I just scored that out and wrote over this page anyway, I guess. Jane smiled. Don't question the Volturi, was all she replied. So she was driving this what? So she was okay. So she was doing this to me. Alec put his hand on her shoulder. Sister, please. Arrow wants him alive. He turned his eyes to me as I got up. He must be, or the bait for her will never work. Her? Who would come and rescue me? The Cullens. Maybe it's Sophia. Maybe it's Sophia. I'll use my gift, Jane. He stepped towards me, and then all I remember is black. I couldn't see anything or move. So this must be Alec's power. Alfie just openly accepted that. Like, he was like, they don't like the sun, they're really pale, they're vampires. Alec has a power? Of course he has a supernatural ability. He's probably a vampire too. Like, Jackson is just like so on board with all of this. He's just like, yeah, they're vampires and they probably have special abilities. That's fine. I was expecting that much. So I woke up in a chair in the middle of a grand room. Jane and Alec were standing on the other side. I looked around and saw about 10 other. I might be missing a page here because this doesn't make any sense. I'm missing a page! Oh no, I'm missing a page, I think. I'm missing a page and I can't find it, but I'll fill in the blanks for you just this time, not for the end. Don't worry, I'll leave your creativity open for that part. But I looked around and saw about 10 other people. They looked like vampires. A guy in the middle was there. Then I guess some people showed up. Who's talking here? Is this Sophia? No, okay. The person talking now is Jane, I think. So I looked around, about 10 other people were there. They all looked like vampires. In the middle of the room were Jane, Alec, and Arrow. And then I said, like, why are you doing this to me? What do you have against Sophia? And then Jane says, it was 1759. Arrow was looking for new members with great power for the Volturi. When he found only one vampire with power, he decided to change humans. Most had no power. Some died, but some had a power. Isn't that so well written? Like, that's incredible. I can't believe I did that. Nearly all were ridiculous, though. She paused to breathe and smiled with a hollow smile. We were left with two who didn't get themselves killed. There were two reasons. They had self-control, so they knew when the hunt was on, and they could be around humans. And two, they each had a great power. She breathed once more, and her eyes flickered back to me as she had been looking into space. William was in his 20s, and he could hypnotize anyone. The girl, Sophia, was 16, and she was a mirror. When anyone used their power on her, she could reflect it and use their power against them. I feel like that's such a cliche power now, though. Like, it's a really cool one, but I feel like a lot of people have that ability because it's just so OP. Like, it doesn't really matter what anyone else has because you can just so easily be like, oh, I'm rehydrating. I've been talking for an hour straight and I still have that to go. Her hollow smile had disappeared. William got himself killed less than 20 years later, leaving just Sophia. I could tell Jane didn't like Sophia. In fact, like she wanted to kill her. Sophia was extremely powerful. With her on our side, we could win any battle, but Sophia didn't like wars and wouldn't fight unless it was ruining our lives. Sophia wouldn't fight against the Cullens with us, and when she paused like she didn't want to say it, defeated us, she decided that she didn't want to be a monster anymore and went to join the vegetarian Cullens about 6 years ago. Wow, this chick really held a grudge. They're close, less than 10 minutes away, a man spoke from the other side of the room. The next 10 minutes passed in a blur. I knew the Cullens were coming to their inevitable death. For me, the truth was, I had fallen in love with. With who? I can't wait to know. Sophia Cullen. Sorry, I accidentally messed my pages up and I'm trying to fix it because I don't want this out of order because that's going to make it hell to get published, you know? Oh, sorry, I was having a dramatic moment. Truth was, I had fallen in love with Sophia Cullen and it was my fault she was going to die or become evil again. Alexi's like, I'm in love with her, but she might become evil again, I'm not quite sure. I don't know her that well, so like she might become a murderer, like who knows at this point? The doors smashed open just less than 10 minutes later. Let him go, Sophia spoke calmly. Arrow stood up and smiled. Ah, the Cullens. It's nice to see you all here again. Carlyle, my old friend. Carlyle stayed emotionless. Why don't you consider rejoining us? Carlyle, the kind doctor, used to be in the Volturi. That explains why they let Sophia join them. Did Carlyle used to be in the Volturi? I honestly don't remember much of Twilight, to be honest, so. It's been 6 years since our quarrel over Nessie, Carlyle spoke, pointing at Nessie. We don't want another fight. Now he pointed to me. I was like, it's been 6 years ever since we fought over Nessie. Now we don't want another fight for this one. This bastard. Of course not. Just give us Sophia, Bella, Edward, Alice, Jasper, Nessie, Jacob, and you, Carlyle, can leave with Esme and the other two, Arrow said. Oh, it's not a big list of demands. Did he genuinely think that they would... Right, okay, like, I know that they're supposed to be, like, really, like, big on humans and everything, but did he really think that, like, a singular human was worth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 vampires and a werewolf? Like, he's not that special, I'm sure. He's like, oh yeah, just give us, like, every single person in your group, and then I'll give you this human back. He smiled like it was a fair deal. Carlyle didn't reply. Shame, Arrow spoke. I turned my attention to Sophia. She was staring down at Jane. Finally, Jane spoke. I may not be able to hurt you without hurting myself or your family because of Bella, but no one is protecting. She didn't finish before I felt a sharp electric pain in my gut. I fell out of my chair and onto the floor in a ball. Sorry, I forgot. I love how like Bella's like, oh yeah, I'll protect my family. Is the human important? Not really. Oh, sorry, I forgot. He just got stabbed. But like, I was able to remember that much. Sorry, I forgot. I heard Bella call. I felt cold hands, warm hands, and normal hands holding me. I couldn't breathe properly, but I opened my eyes and saw Esme, Jake, and Nessie over me. I was still on the floor in pain, with Jane staring at me, smiling, but I focused on Sophia. You know, the love of his life. She ran across the room in 2 bounds and jumped on Jane and smashed her fist into Jane's face. That's when the pain stopped. Excellent. Let's fight. A tall, bulky man spoke from the corner. In a few seconds, each member of the Volturi was fighting a Cullen. Jake shook and turned into a giant brown wolf. Arrow just sat on his chair and watched the fight. I love that Jackson genuinely does not care at all that Jake has turned into a werewolf. He just said, oh, he's a werewolf now, so that makes sense, that's fine. I know he's been through a lot in the last, like, 24 hours, but, like, I think he would be a little bit more, like, shook to see a boy just turn into, like, a wolf, but I guess not. I could tell Sophia and Jasper were the best fighters, with fancy moves. Alice was too quick to see. Edward always seemed to know what was about to happen. Emmett was having fun fighting the big guy, and Rosalie was really going at it. Nessie and Jake were a team. Esme and Bella weren't the best fighters, but they were still pretty good at it. Arrow then focused on me. He turned his head in Sophia's direction, watching her and Jane throwing fancy moves at each other. He stood up and started walking at a human pace towards me. "Don't move, Jackson. It's part of his plan," Edward said to me. Arrow was at my side. "I wonder what you taste like." That frightened me, and before I could stop myself, I was screaming for help. It was then I was thrown across the room by Emmett, and Emmett, Jasper, Edward, Carlisle, and Sophia stood in front of Arrow. The others kept fighting. A woman was touching Arrow's back and walked around him to Sophia. "Well, well, if it isn't our little traitor," she smirked, but Sophia stayed motionless. It seems like you right to die. It actually is written correctly. I'm just an idiot who misread it. "It serves you right to die. You and your family and your boyfriend too," she laughed bitterly. "You always were too soft. You could never defend yourself. Yes, you can fight well, but you never win." She smiled once more, but Sophia cracked and snarled at her. She jumped on her and smashed her foot into the woman's face, making her fall over. The woman tried to fight back, but Sophia had her pinned down. Sophia lifted her hand and clenched her fist. "Suck it, bitch," she said, before smashing the woman's face with her fist. Arrow smirked. "Ah, I shall miss her. But I assume she got what she deserved. Stop the fight. We don't want to lose any more lives, do we?" Everyone stopped fighting. "Our family stays together," Esme spoke. "We'll never leave each other," Jasper said. Touching. "You may leave, but no, we will never back down. You will either die or become the Volturi." Arrow smirked. "Take Jackson. Remember, a rule is broken. I suggest you make plans to fix it." I stood up from where I had been lying. The Cullens were round me in seconds and walked me out the door. I heard a scream that seemed to be coming from Jane. Sophia, who was beside me, just smiled. I'm assuming what happened there is that Jane was trying to get like a final good curse in, and Sophia like reflected it off her, because otherwise I have no idea. Either that or like they left and Jane was just like, "Ah!" and Sophia's like When we were outside, I figured out that I was in Italy, which would explain why Sophia knew so much Italian. "Are you okay, Jackson?" Sophia asked. "I'm fine, but why would you all risk your lives for me?" Sophia smiled and kissed me. How many teenage guys can say that they kissed a vampire? I mean, I guess he's got his priorities straight. I mean, like, they've known each other for 4 days, or maybe it's 5. 5 makes it sound a little bit more romantic and realistic, so we'll go for 5. But it's nice to know that he's really got his priorities sorted out. "We may not have defeated them, but Sophia killing Arrow's guard shocked them," Edward laughed. "What rule is broken?" I asked. The Cullens stopped walking in the shade they'd been walking in. "Telling humans about us," Rosalie said. "They either have to die or become like us," Bella said. "There's always ways of keeping the Volturi in the dark," Edward said. I like that I used "said" 3 times in 3 different speeches. The Cullens smiled like a family. "I want to be a vampire. Animal blood doesn't sound too bad," I said. "I'd miss my mom, but my dad wouldn't care. My sister hates me. It'll be painful while you're changing, and once you're a vampire, you'll want nothing but blood." "Human blood," Jasper said. "So you won't be seeing much of me and Jake till you've learned to control yourself," Nessie said from the corner of the car we were in. "Why?" I asked. "Well, I may be a dog, but I still have blood, and Nessie is half vampire with a heartbeat," Jake explained. "Are you sure you want to do this? You'll stop aging forever at 16. You can never have kids unless it's with a human," Sophia questioned. "I want to be with you, so yes, but there's only a little while till school ends, so can we wait till then?" I squeezed Sophia's hand. I'm also just going to ignore the fact that Jake is like, "I'm a dog," so I feel like he wouldn't call himself that. Of course, Jackson, Alice, who was driving, said. Carlisle, Rosalie, Emmett, Esme, Bella, and Edward had come in other cars. "I knew you would choose that anyway." 4 days after I knew you would choose that anyway, so I've already got it all planned for you. So here's the schedule. 4 days after school ends, also 2 days after you tell your mom you're going to camp, Alice explained. Camp? My mom asked. Yeah, the Cullens all go to it. They said they'd pay for me. It's super fun and lasts until 2 days before school starts again, I said. It had been 3 weeks since I had come back from Italy, and the plans were set. On Sunday, Carlisle was going to bite me, and Nessie and Jake would leave and come back at the end of summer when I'd gotten more used to blood. I spent the night packing and told my mom I was leaving in the afternoon. Sophia picked me up in her car. She was smiling, but you could see she was sad. So she's like, I gave my mom a long hug and a recent picture of us together, and she didn't question that at all. He's like, goodbye, I shall miss you. Here's a picture of me to remember me by. And she's just like, alright, see you later. I guess she doesn't care about him that much. I got in the car and waved to my mom for the last time ever. Soph put her cold hand onto my hand. You don't have to do this, Jackson, she said quietly. Yes. Now let's go to your house. I want to settle in before I'm out for a few days. Sophia sighed and drove off to her house. The house still looked the same, but the inside was huge. Every room was so modern. Finally, we came to Sophia's room. So this is where you don't sleep? I said. The Cullens had told me everything about themselves. He's such a joker, just lightening the mood, really making everyone feel comfortable. Jackson's such a good character. TM, TM, TM. I'm using Jackson again, the next main character in my next story. I had noticed that Bella and Alice were best friends. Edward had a closer bond with Alice. Bella had a jokey bond with Emmett, and Sophia and Jasper were extremely close, probably because their backgrounds were so similar. They were both born into human blood, and their powers were used for war. Jasper appeared at the door and leant against it. Am I interrupting something? He smiled. Sophia jabbed the palm of her hand into his shoulder. Shut up, Jazz. Jasper grabbed Jazz? Was his nickname Jazz in the movies? Or did I just go like, oh, Jazz? Shut up, Jazz. Jasper grabbed his shoulder and faked pain because they'd never really hurt each other. Jazz, what did you come up here for? Soph asked. Well, Ness and Jake left to go to our new house, so Carlisle was wondering whether Jackson wants to get bitten now. Yeah. Do you want to get bitten now? Yeah. A lot of commitment there. You can tell that he's really excited for this. I stood up and Sophia took my hand. Remind me why you can't bite me? I asked Sophia as we walked downstairs. Jackson, Sophia began, I told you, I've only been away from human blood for about 6 years. After more than 200 years of it, if I bite you, as soon as I tasted your blood, my hunting instinct will kick in, and I'd kill you, and then I want to kill myself, Sophia said. That's insensitive and I'm sorry, but I was 12. Like Jasper would let that happen, I said. Jasper smiled. Sophia did too, and then continued. But Carlisle is basically immune to blood. He's a doctor, so he has to be around it every day. He can bite you safely, she finished. All of the Cullens were in Carlisle's study. It felt like a show. I lay down on the bed type thing, which is how I actually described it, they'd put beside the window, especially for me. You don't have to do this, Jackson, Bella said. I want to, was all I said as I made myself comfortable. Carlisle sat down beside me, on a chair. He lifted my hand, and I took the last look around the room. Esme's hand was on Carlisle's shoulder. Bella was leaning against Edward's side while looking at me, and Rosalie looked like she couldn't care less. And Emmett was holding her waist. Alice was, why are they there? Why, is it like a spectacle? Do they all have to be there to like initiate him in or something? I don't know. I'm pretty sure they weren't there for Bella getting bit, were they? I can't remember. I guess it's like a free show. Maybe they're kind of bored. One hand, and reaching around him to Sophia to hold her hand with the other. Jasper was sort of hugging Sophia sideways to him to steady her. Sophia smiled sadly and held Alice's hand. Carlisle opened his mouth and bit into my wrist. The pain was excruciating, which I think I actually spelt right. Why can I not spell, like, very easy words correctly, but apparently excruciating was, like, extremely well known in my 12-year-old brain. I could feel fire in my veins. I screamed. Sophia whimpered and broke down crying. Jasper held her up. I knew if I kept screaming at the pain, Sophia would be a wreck for the next 3 or so days, so I clenched my mouth shut and felt my body react. I closed my eyes. The fire was too hot. It felt like I jumped into the fire and just sat there until someone put it out. Jackson, can you hear me? Bella said. If so, do what I did. Listen to the voices and the other stuff you couldn't hear before, like footsteps and stuff. We should be able to do that. It's been 2 days. 2 days? Bella was right. I could hear everything in great detail. Alice? Jasper asked. I could hear jealous. Jealous? Alice? Jasper asked. I could hear Alice humming. How long? Edward asked. About 3 hours, Alice replied. 3 hours of more pain. I could hear Sophia's breath steady. Oh, okay. I could hear Sophia's breath steady. She had probably gotten over the pain I was feeling, but this pain was to be with Sophia forever. The Cullens sounds like a cult. The Cullens were going to be my family. I'd drown at the end of summer. Oh, okay. The Cullens were going to tell my family I drowned at the end of summer. I'm sorry, that's insensitive. But by then, I'd be more controlled. It would be a closed casket. To be safe side. That wasn't a sentence. The Volturi suspect he will be powerless. That's why they didn't change him. They don't want a powerless vampire. They won't even be strong like Emmett, apparently. Edward's voice interrupted my thoughts. I'd just be an average immortal vampire like Rosalie? Bad thought. Was that why she was so... And that's it. That's the whole story. So like it's got a really good ending, you can tell. It had a brilliant ending. I think that the way it just cut off is like really artistic, and the choice that I decided to do that at 12 is such like an interesting thought, that I had such an autoristic style. Like I really knew what I wanted, and I really wanted to not actually finish a story and give a complete rounded description of anything. So what I imagined was going to happen was that he was going to be like, oh no, I'm going to be powerless, and he was going to wake up and probably have some form of cool power that I probably couldn't think of, and that's like why I just didn't finish it. And that was probably going to be the ending, was like he was going to beat someone up, and him and Sophia were going to be like desperately in love because they've known each other for about a week at this point, so that makes a lot of sense. And that was probably just going to be the whole story. I don't know if there was going to be a sequel to this, but I mean, maybe one day there could be. And unfortunately, having read the whole thing, I don't know how much better my writing has gotten in the last 10 years, so that's great.
And that's it. We have come to an end. That is all I have. This was my first ever long-winded writing. I don't think I ever wrote anything more than a couple of paragraphs, and it was probably my first ever personal writing project as well. It's a little embarrassing that it was a self-insert Twilight fanfiction, but for a 12-year-old it's pretty impressive, I suppose. The ending was a bit abrupt, which is a little bit unfortunate, but that's just how it has to be because I never finish anything to this day, a whole decade and a bit later. But I hope you enjoyed reading it with me, and you know, maybe we can just finish the story together in the comments, I don't know, whatever. And I try to post pretty much every week, so maybe I'll see you next week? I don't know, but thanks for watching. Bye!